Six high-profile lawmakers, all with distinguished careers in the military or the intelligence community, did not simply engage in spontaneous dissent. They were the highly credible, visible faces of what sources now confirm was a coordinated psychological operation, meticulously scripted, professionally funded, and timed with surgical precision. The goal: to undermine the incoming commander-in-chief before he could issue a single order. This campaign wasn't an accident. It was a strategic attempt at political destabilization, moving past reckless rhetoric and straight into a federal crime scene. How did this spiral into one of the most consequential federal criminal investigations in decades, involving the Pentagon and the FBI? And who was the hidden architect pulling the strings? We uncover the full story. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it. The story we are diving into today, the collapse of what investigators are calling the Disobey Operation, it's just breathtaking. Not just for the political side of it, but for the sheer sophistication of its execution. We've had hints for months that something was off, but recent confirmations from sources close to the investigation they've exposed the entire framework, the money, the production, the script. This has completely transformed what people saw as political outrage into a full-blown national security investigation.
And that distinction is absolutely crucial. You're right. We have to understand this isn't about, parsing political rhetoric anymore. Not at all. This operation is now being analyzed using the same sophisticated models that our own intelligence agencies reserve for state-level threats. We're talking about influence campaigns targeting foreign rivals.
Wow.
Yeah. The core finding is that this video, featuring 6 very influential lawmakers, all with these deep ties to the CIA or the military, which gave them just immense credibility, is absolutely not spontaneous. The evidence the FBI has gathered points to a highly organized, professional psychological operation. Time to perfection.
So let's establish for everyone listening exactly what this message was and why that timing made it so toxic. You had these 6 lawmakers staring directly into the camera and essentially giving a command to America's troops. They were telling them to question orders, to resist, to internally defy the incoming administration before President Trump had even taken the oath of office. That specific timing, right at the transfer of power, that's what it immediately set off all the alarm bells, wasn't it?
It was the deliberate timing that it elevated the alarm level from 0 to 100 instantly. A transition of power it's the most sensitive period for any military command structure.
Yeah.
It demands absolute fidelity, absolute clarity. So when you have 6 highly credentialed people, the troops were literally trained to respect delivering a synchronized message of insubordination at that exact moment. You're crossing a critical line. Military analysts didn't even call this political dissent. They immediately labeled it destabilization.
And when you say destabilization, what specifically about the language moves it beyond, a simple difference of opinion? Service members already have a duty to question an unlawful order, right?
They do. And that is precisely the rhetorical trap the script was designed to set. It's a very clever, very insidious trap. The difference lies in the intent that was built into the script's sequence. It's in the use of those emotionally charged, loaded terms like unlawful commands directed at an administration that hadn't issued a single order yet. The language, the cadence, the whole sequencing of the arguments. Sources say it directly mirrors the exact type of messaging that foreign adversaries use when they're trying to sow chaos and fracture a chain of command.
Like in a color revolution attempt?
Precisely. The playbook was lifted directly from strategic influence campaigns used overseas to get military or police units to defect or just hesitate at a critical moment. The goal was surgical. Inject mistrust directly into the command structure of the U.S. military before the new commander-in-chief could issue one binding order. You're preemptively labeling any order he might give as potentially illegitimate.
And the initial flag wasn't just the content or the timing, though. Intelligence analysts advising the administration weren't just shocked by what was said, but how it looked. The production quality itself was that second major red flag. What were the forensic elements that signaled it was professionally handled?
Oh, absolutely. When that video first came out, insiders, especially those with a background in media analysis and psychological operations, they focused heavily on the technical aspects. They immediately flagged how polished it was. The lighting was consistently high quality.
Right, stuff you don't get with a webcam in an office.
No, not at all.
No.
This requires specialized equipment, a professional setup. Then you had the almost imperceptible but deliberate cuts between lawmakers, the uniform camera angles. You could just see the precise scripting in their delivery. The pacing was unnatural. It was measured. And this level of technical synchronization, where 6 different people look like they were filmed under the same control conditions and then edited seamlessly. That just doesn't look like a quickly thrown together statement. It looked manufactured, it looked staged, and it looked like it had a budget.
And in the intelligence world, if something looks like a production, you immediately start looking for the producer. So that's where suspicion shifted away from just political outrage and towards the idea of professional PSYOPS handlers. They weren't just looking for political consultants at that point.
Precisely. Analysts quickly decided the messaging was, and I'm quoting here, too precise, too synchronized, too polished for 6 people to just come up with on their own. It showed a level of coordination and expertise that's far beyond your typical political communication shop. So this is what led investigators to start looking for outside handlers, individuals or firms that are routinely used in complex psychological operations designed to shape behavior and opinion.
It's just so interesting that the core suspicion that really solidified this whole investigation hinges on the fact that the lawmakers were they were just highly credible actors reading a script they didn't write. Their personal integrity was being weaponized.
That's the key inference from the earliest intelligence reports. When analysts studied the footage, they found that the cadence, the specific strategic pauses, the points of emphasis, even the carefully modulated emotional tone of all 6 lawmakers, it allegedly matched specific patterns that intelligence agencies have cataloged from previous PSYOPS campaigns. They were the credible faces, using their service records to establish instant trust in the message. But internal analysis confirms they were just the deliverers. They were not the architects.
And once that suspicion solidified, once it moved from a political theory to a verified intelligence pattern, the whole legal landscape it changed completely. Which brings us to the massive, unprecedented legal action now being taken by both the Pentagon and the FBI.
The legal quake is profound, and the initial shockwave centered immediately on Senator Mark Kelly. Sources are confirming the Pentagon is actively reviewing its authority to recall Senator Kelly, who's a retired naval aviator, to active duty under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ.
Okay, for our listeners, let's be clear. Recalling a sitting United States senator who is a retired officer for a UCMJ violation, is there any modern precedent for this at all? How is that even legally possible?
There is none. The gravity of this, it cannot be overstated. While the recall authority does technically exist under Title 10 of the U.S. Code for retired officers who commit military offenses, especially things like sedition or conduct, unbecoming an officer, applying it to a sitting U.S. senator, is completely uncharted constitutional territory. Pentagon lawyers are reportedly calling this the most consequential UCMJ question in decades.
But the authority does exist.
It does. Retirement typically places officers on the retired list, which means they actually remain part of the armed forces and are still subject to the UCMJ. But actually recalling him would instantly create a challenge to the separation of powers.
Let's get into the specifics of the UCMJ here. What articles are investigators potentially looking at, and what are the specific charges they could bring related to this video?
The focus is mainly on 2 key areas. First, and most critically, is Article 94, which covers sedition and mutiny. Encouraging troops to disobey orders, even if you frame it as questioning unlawful orders, flirts dangerously close to soliciting mutiny or sedition, especially when it's targeted at a change in the commander-in-chief. Sedition, under military law, is an attempt to create a revolt against lawful authority. The Pentagon's argument would be that the strategic, coordinated nature of this message was exactly that, an attempt to create revolt.
And the second area?
The second, and maybe more broadly applicable to a retired officer's public conduct, is Article 134 of the General Article. This covers all disorders and neglects that are prejudicial to good order and discipline. Publicly undermining the chain of command, even in civilian life, can easily be seen as that kind of conduct. A retired officer still has a duty not to bring discredit upon the armed forces.
So, the mechanism of recalling Kelly, it's not necessarily about putting him in front of a court-martial tomorrow, but it's about establishing legal jurisdiction over his actions as a former military member. Is that right? And what would be the political fallout if they actually did it?
Exactly. If the Pentagon successfully recalls him, they're essentially saying his conduct falls under military law, period, regardless of his current office. Now, military law experts we reviewed suggested the political and legal fallout would make actually executing it deeply controversial, even if the violation is clear. So at this stage, it serves more as a massive political and legal threat than a guaranteed action. But the implication is chillingly simple. If the Pentagon can recall a U.S. senator for encouraging insubordination, it means every single person involved in that video is suddenly standing on legal quicksand.
But the ground is cracking under them from the civilian side, too. The FBI opened a separate, parallel criminal probe. They scheduled formal interviews with all 6 lawmakers. This is way beyond political theater.
It is. This dual-track approach, UCMJ review by the military, criminal probe by the DOJ, is designed to ensure accountability and avoid any political interference. And we have to emphasize, this is not some polite congressional ethics inquiry. This is a formal criminal investigation. Investigators are looking for hard evidence of coordinated messaging, of a pre-planned conspiracy, and crucially, of criminal intent to destabilize the government. That could lead to charges like conspiracy or solicitation of mutiny under federal civilian law.
And the response from the incoming administration was immediate and total. Sources confirm President Trump ordered full-spectrum, top-down investigations by both the Pentagon and the FBI.
And that signals a massive change in strategic posture. The message was crystal clear. No exceptions, no political immunity for interfering with the chain of command. The administration views this alleged operation not as politics, but as an internal attack on the structural integrity of the military, an attack that has to be rooted out completely. This top-down approach is designed to uncover every single layer, the money, the coordination, the scripting that allowed this to happen.
To really grasp the complexity here, we have to look deeper into the analysis that the intelligence agencies used. You mentioned they were using the same models they reserve for foreign destabilization efforts. Let's talk about the Eskia model they used on the video script.
Certainly. So the FBI and Pentagon analysts, they treated the video like a piece of operational messaging. They used established psychological warfare analysis tools. The SKIP model, it stands for Sequence, Cadence, Objective, and Psychology, is a standard tool they use to analyze destabilization messaging. When they analyzed the sequence, the findings were described as textbook and chilling. It proved the scripting followed known protocols for fracturing command loyalty.
So walk us through that chilling sequence again. How did they break down the structure using authority, threat, and solution?
Well, it followed a classic 3-step psychological operation sequence. It's designed to override critical thinking in the target audience, in this case, military personnel. Step 1 was authority. The message always began by leveraging the lawmakers' credibility. Their CIA, their military, their special ops backgrounds. This establishes instant, unquestionable trust. The goal is to make a soldier think, if they believe this, I have to listen.
Step 2 is the threat.
Exactly, the threat. They immediately framed President Trump, the incoming civilian head of the military, as dangerous, unstable, a threat to democracy. This artificially creates the urgent moral justification for immediate, potentially illegal action. And then you have step 3, the solution. A direct, simple, memorable command. Disobey. The message is simple by design, so it can be easily internalized and repeated.
That structure, authority, threat, solution is incredibly powerful because it just shuts down any internal debate. It substitutes the complex legal reality of the UCMJ with a simple moral panic.
It is the very architecture of psychological propaganda. It's designed to get an immediate emotional behavioral response. It completely bypasses any need for troops to consult military legal counsel or their commanding officers. Analysts confirm this is textbook psychological operation sequencing. It's the exact structure used in attempts to fracture foreign militaries, especially during moments of political turmoil.
But the analysts also concluded that the primary target wasn't just the troops. It was about public perception too, wasn't it? Providing cover for what the troops might do.
That's the essential insight. The immediate target was the chain of command, yes. But the ultimate overarching goal was to condition the American public. The conclusion was that the architects needed the country to believe Trump's leadership was fundamentally illegitimate, even before he ever issued a single major order. This video served to set a pervasive, preemptive narrative of illegitimacy in the media and in the public sphere. It ensures that any future executive order, no matter how routine, could be instantly questioned.
And following that groundwork led investigators to connections that are, well, they're arguably the most explosive part of this entire investigation, the identity of the alleged architects. If the structure was textbook, PSYOPS, who wrote the textbook?
Well, when investigators cross-referenced these specific PSYOPS patterns and messaging tactics, they found recurring connections. We're talking about known patterns and methodologies linking back to former Brennan-era analysts and propaganda strategists. These are individuals allegedly tied to previous foreign influence campaigns and deep state influence efforts. They know how to manage narrative warfare, and this discovery raised the explosive, defining question for the FBI probe. If the 6 lawmakers were the credible messengers, who was the brain? Who was the puppeteer?
This suggests they weren't just coordinating a domestic political message. They were, in effect, importing destabilization tactics used against foreign governments and deploying them against an incoming U.S. administration. That is the very definition of weaponizing intelligence tradecraft.
That is the working theory that solidified this as a federal crime scene. It moved past politics when investigators realized they weren't dealing with 6 outraged politicians, but with professional strategists applying deep psychological warfare expertise to our domestic political environment.
And this alleged operation wasn't confined to a single video, which brings us to this element of synchronized destabilization, a multi-front assault. What was the other public messaging campaign that emerged at the same time?
As the analysis of the video deepened, a very bizarre and concerning pattern of physical messaging emerged. It really shocked the intelligence community. At the same time the video was released, highly professional billboards started popping up nationwide, strategically positioned near major military installations. We're talking locations outside Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, other key bases with large troop populations and a lot of civilian traffic.
And the message on the billboards, how did it reinforce the video?
The messaging was nearly identical in its core demand and its psychological structure. They were explicitly telling service members, their families, and the public to question orders, to stand against perceived unlawful commands. It just echoed the exact sentiments of the lawmakers. The timing was identified as too perfect to ignore. It created this coordinated, synchronized messaging environment. You had the credible lawmakers delivering the message on video, and then it's reinforced by billboards on the ground near military families. It maximizes exposure and normalizes the idea of insubordination.
Which immediately pivots the entire investigation toward the most critical evidence in any criminal probe, the money. Billboards, professional video production, this all costs a lot of money. Financial analysts must have treated that funding trail as the primary crime scene.
Financial forensics became absolutely paramount. Media production experts estimated that Disobey video alone cost tens of thousands of dollars for production, editing, and distribution. I mean, that's far beyond what 6 lawmakers would just casually fund themselves. So it raised the crucial question, who paid for all this?
And following that money trail led analysts back to familiar networks, specifically citing Soros-aligned PACs and nonprofits. What was the methodology that suggested a deliberate attempt to hide who the donors were?
Well, the financial tracing pointed to ties with these networks, which are known for strategic influence campaigns. But the immediate red flag was the methodology used to channel the money. Analysts saw early leads pointing to these complex webs of intermediary entities layered shell corporations, specific nonprofits acting as funding conduits. This layering is designed to create distance, to force investigators to trace transactions through multiple opaque steps, obscuring the original source of the funds from where they were spent.
So that deliberate financial choreography, it suggested an intent to hide the source, which is often a strong indicator of criminal activity.
Exactly. The focus shifted entirely from what was said to how it was paid for. The investigation became about money, intent, and potentially foreign-influenced funnels. When you have synchronized messaging across digital and physical platforms, all funded through these opaque intermediaries tied to organizations with histories in strategic influence, the conclusion drawn by analysts was that this was a synchronized and multi-front destabilization push.
And that brings us to the ultimate question of intent. The so what factor. Why execute such a complex, risky PSYOPS campaign? Sources are suggesting a calculated long-term political strategy was the real objective.
An FBI insider leak has provided the working theory for the federal probe. Investigators don't believe this was a one-off act. They view the video as highly strategic, designed to lay the foundational groundwork for a potential 2026 impeachment attempts against President Trump.
Okay, let's unpack that. A preemptive impeachment strategy. How would this video specifically enable a future impeachment?
The blueprint allegedly mirrored the tactics from the first Trump impeachment, which relied heavily on intelligence community whistleblowers and insiders framing the narrative. So the plan was to precondition the military and the public to doubt the legitimacy of Trump's command first. If the military population was already primed and conditioned to question orders, thanks to the video and the billboards, then insiders who were politically aligned could be activated later on cue to blow the whistle, claiming Trump had issued illegal orders.
It's the ultimate manufactured crisis. You set the narrative, you operationalize the mechanism for dissent, and then all you need is a trigger event.
Precisely. The goal was to create a scenario where the internal mechanism of defiance, which was encouraged by the video, and the external political opportunity, the impeachment push, could align perfectly. There's a quote from an agent that just encapsulates the danger. History doesn't repeat unless someone forces it to. The architects weren't waiting for a crisis. They were creating the ideological conditions for one to be triggered later, making it look like a spontaneous crisis of conscience when it was actually choreographed from the start.
And the immediate consequences inside the military were explosive. The internal response among active duty service members was characterized by what? Outrage, confusion, shock. The operational impact of this must be what truly concerns the Pentagon.
It should. The core problem, as their tired officers have warned, is structural. Encouraging individual troops to become self-appointed legal analysts who judge every command. That is antithetical to how a military functions. A military cannot operate if every member feels licensed to debate the morality of an order in the field. It functions on a rigid, immediate chain of command. When lawmakers try to fracture that chain at the highest level, the ability of the United States to act decisively is instantly compromised.
That distinction between obedience to a lawful order and becoming a lawyer in the field is fundamental to why this was so toxic. That's the kind of chaos that takes years, maybe decades, to repair.
An analyst provided a chilling example to illustrate the severity of this risk. They cited the internal unrest and split loyalties seen after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, where a small but visible number of troops voiced disturbing opinions online. They warned that lawmakers telling these same individuals, the ones already showing signs of struggling with discipline or loyalty, to defy their superiors was literally fuel poured directly onto smoldering embers. It showed a profound, reckless disregard for the internal stability and cohesion of the armed forces.
And as the reality of the federal investigation set in, these dual probes by the Pentagon and the FBI, the political side of the whole operation just began to implode. We saw immediate, visible signs of panic from those involved.
Senator Mark Kelly's reaction was the most revealing signal. He issued this long, frantic public statement that was widely seen not as a clarification, but as a desperate defensive attempt to contain the fallout. The statement immediately contradicted his earlier remarks and just raised more questions than it answered, specifically about his understanding of the boundaries between political speech and the UCMJ.
It sounded less like leadership and more like self-preservation.
That's the consensus. Every attempt Kelly made to publicly justify the video only served to raise more questions about what he knew, when he knew it, and critically, who was advising him. His visible panic signaled that the political blowback had become minor compared to the legal liability now staring him in the face.
And that panic spread. The DNC's internal response was the political equivalent of a full retreat.
Sources confirmed the Democratic National Committee quietly but firmly ordered its staff to stop discussing the issue completely. That internal directive is the clearest signal that the political establishment realized they were stepping on a legal landmine. The lawmakers involved began rapidly distancing themselves, claiming they were poorly advised or that their message was misinterpreted. They realized the game had shifted. This wasn't a debate over opinions anymore. This was about subpoenas and criminal intent.
Which leads us to the critical turning point, unmasking the mastermind. Investigators had the script analysis, the money trail, the evidence of intent, but they needed that direct, technical, link-proving coordination and professional architecture.
Right. The FBI knew they couldn't just rely on interpretation. So they shifted the investigative focus from the public messaging to private communications. They were searching for emails, encrypted messages, internal memos, draft scripts, anything exchanged between the 6 lawmakers and known former intelligence officials. Congressional staffers with known ties to strategic influence organizations immediately came under intense scrutiny. The crucial evidence became the timeline, the coordination of drafts, revisions, the timing of shared talking points, all things that prove centralized execution.
It sounds like a needle in a haystack search, trying to find that one digital artifact that connects the politicians to the PSYOPS pros, especially if they were using advanced tradecraft.
It was extremely challenging. The architects had clearly used standard tradecraft to hide their involvement in encrypted channels, intermediaries. However, the final breakdown, the moment that allegedly brought the entire operation crashing down, came through digital forensics. They were searching for what they call digital forensic artifacts.
And what did digital forensics reveal?
It uncovered the missing piece, matching IP addresses and geolocation data. These technical artifacts linked the video's actual production and its final upload to a specific location and, critically, a specific network that was traceable back to a former intelligence contractor. This was the definitive breakthrough. It provided a hard, physical, digital link where before there was only circumstantial evidence. The chain of custody was complete.
What's the profile of this former intelligence contractor? Why is that link so damaging to the whole operation?
Well, this individual was already a known quantity to the intelligence community. They had a documented history tied to complex psychological influence projects overseas. This was not a casual political consultant. This was a seasoned professional in the art of behavioral manipulation and clandestine messaging. Once that IP address link was established, the rest of the puzzle just clicked into place. Financial traces connected to the same individuals who had the funding. And crucially, the exact language and sequencing in the video script matched documented patterns from previous destabilization campaigns attributed to this exact same network.
So the conclusion from investigators is that this wasn't some conspiracy of chance. It was a confirmed, reusable blueprint executed by professionals who knew how to hide. The lawmakers were, by conclusion, just the visible mouthpieces, not the architects.
The evidence now clearly points to a highly professional, well-funded influence operation executed by seasoned psychological warfare strategists. They simply used their political connections and the credibility of the 6 lawmakers to deliver the final product. The mastermind was someone who knew precisely how to weaponize messaging and hide in the technical shadows, believing their expertise made them untouchable. That IP address exposed the fatal arrogance of the entire operation.
As we synthesize this entire picture, the overall conclusion from analysts is maybe the most deeply unsettling part of this entire saga. This operation went far beyond a political stunt. It was a fundamental attempt to destabilize the country from within.
That is the chilling ultimate conclusion. Analysts concluded the entire operation was a meticulously scripted, coordinated attempt to deliberately pre-write a constitutional emergency and then blame the resulting chaos on President Trump. The fundamental goal was never to protect democracy or the Constitution. It was calculated to create a crisis, undermine confidence in military leadership, encourage leaks, and justify a full-scale impeachment push in 2026 based on a narrative of illegitimacy they themselves had established years before.
The alleged architects of this operation, however, appear to have made a fundamental miscalculation about the political and legal environment they were in.
A profound miscalculation. Sources confirm the incoming administration has signaled unequivocally that this is a new era. The Trump 2.0 White House has drawn a clear line in the sand. There will be no political immunity for lawmakers who undermine the military chain of command, no tolerance for opaque, potentially foreign-funded influence messaging, and absolutely no pass for encouraging insubordination. That message has caused genuine legal and political panic all across Washington.
And we are hearing reports of congressional staffers associated with this network suddenly lawyering up, consultants frantically scrubbing their digital footprints. The implications are clear.
They've grasped the gravity of their legal jeopardy. Now that the handlers, the financiers, the scriptwriters, now that they've allegedly been exposed by this dual-track federal investigation, accountability isn't seen as a possibility. It's seen as an inevitable outcome. This whole saga serves as a massive warning that weaponizing the military's chain of command for domestic political gain will be met with the full, unprecedented force of a federal criminal investigation. Thank you, and thank you to our listeners.
That's all for this deep dive, but it leaves us with one haunting question. If the guardians of the rules are the first to break them, who is left to protect the game?